As a restoration specialist, I know water damage patterns. That's how I caught Rebecca faking a $2.8 million vault flood to steal her own art collection. The emergency call came in at 8:15 a.m. while I was calibrating my HF 3000 moisture sensors in the truck. Phone buzzed against the dashboard, interrupting my morning routine of checking equipment. Unknown number, but in restoration work, unknowns usually meant money. "Dave Walker Restoration," I answered, setting down the sensor probe. "Thank God," a woman's voice, tight with controlled panic. "This is Rebecca Garcia from Meridian Secure Storage. We have a catastrophic flood situation. How quickly can you get here?" I grabbed my notepad, already calculating drive time. "What kind of flood? Pipe burst? Storm damage?" "Main water line. 6-inch pipe burst at 3:47 a.m. Our entire vault level is underwater. We're talking millions in damages." Millions. The word hung in the air like a promise. Linda's voice echoed in my head from this morning. "Every emergency call is overtime money, Dave. Emma needs new school clothes." I checked my watch. 8:17 a.m. Traffic would be heavy through downtown, but manageable. "I can be there in 30 minutes. Address? 847 Meridian Street, Financial District. Please hurry. I have insurance adjusters coming at noon." I started the engine, already running through my mental checklist. HF 3000 sensors, moisture meters, documentation camera, sample bags. The October morning air was crisp, cutting through my rolled-down window as I pulled into downtown traffic. Radio crackled with weather reports. Clear skies, low humidity. Perfect conditions for moisture detection work. My restoration van cut through the financial district, past glass towers reflecting autumn sunlight. Just another water damage job, I told myself, but the urgency in her voice suggested something bigger. Emergency rates were double standard pricing. Maybe we'd finally catch up on the mortgage. At 847 Meridian Street, I parked outside what looked like a fortress. Meridian Secure Storage, LLC. The brass nameplate gleamed on limestone facade, but dark water stains marked the entrance like tears on expensive makeup. The building screamed money, the kind of place where people stored things they couldn't afford to lose. Rebecca Garcia met me at the door before I could even grab my equipment. Designer suit, sharp shoulder lines, silver-streaked hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Diamond earrings caught the morning light, throwing tiny rainbows across her pale cheeks. "Thank God you're here," she said, extending a manicured hand. Her grip was firm, but her fingers trembled slightly. "Rebecca Garcia, facility owner. The situation is catastrophic." I shook her hand, noting the expensive watch, the perfect nails. "Dave Walker, tell me what happened." "Pipe burst at 3:47 a.m. exactly. Main water line, 6 inches of pressurized water." Her voice carried that corporate precision, but underneath I heard something else. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. "My security systems are completely destroyed. Backup power failed. We lost everything." The lobby smelled of wet carpet and expensive perfume mixed with something metallic. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows on marble walls. Water damage was obvious. Dark stains creeping up wallpaper, buckled hardwood floors, the unmistakable smell of trapped moisture. "Any injuries?" I asked, pulling on latex gloves from my pocket. "No, thank God. The facility was unmanned overnight. Our security guard discovered the flood at 6 a.m. during his rounds." I nodded, already calculating square footage and potential drying time. "I'll need to assess the damage before giving you estimates. Insurance company?" "Pinnacle Mutual. They're sending adjusters at noon." She checked her phone, a nervous habit I noticed. "This facility houses over $12 million in assets. Rare coins, jewelry, important documents. My clients trust me with their most valuable possessions." We walked through marble corridors toward the vault level, her heels clicking on wet stone. The sound echoed off walls lined with security cameras, most dark now, red lights blinking like dying stars. "How many safety deposit boxes?" I asked. 47, all potentially compromised." Her voice cracked slightly on the word compromised. The elevator descended with mechanical precision, but I noticed her checking her phone repeatedly. Screen lit up her face in the dim emergency lighting. No messages, just nervous energy. The air grew thicker as we went down, humidity increasing with each floor. My skin felt sticky, clothes starting to cling. "Backup power systems?" I asked. "Failed completely. We're running on emergency generators now." She gestured at the flickering overhead lights. "The water must have damaged the electrical systems too." The elevator shuddered to a stop. Basement level. She led me down a narrow hallway lined with steel doors, each marked with warning signs about authorized access only. The smell grew stronger. Wet metal, ozone, something else I couldn't identify. Then she opened the vault door. Jesus Christ. Water covered the floor in dark pools, reflecting overhead fluorescence like a twisted mirror. Steel safety deposit boxes lined the walls from floor to ceiling, some showing obvious water damage, rust streaks, warped metal, broken locks hanging like dead things. The air was thick enough to swim through. "The main water line burst right there," Rebecca pointed to a section of wall near the back corner. 6-inch pipe. The pressure was incredible. Water everywhere within minutes. I set down my equipment case, surveying the damage with professional eyes. 15 years of restoration work teaches you to read a scene like a book. But something felt wrong. The water distribution pattern didn't match what she was describing. "Any idea what caused the burst?" I asked, unpacking my HF3000 sensors. "Age, probably. The building's from 1987, these old pipes." She trailed off, wringing her hands. I attached the first moisture probe to a steel safety deposit box, explaining my process. "These sensors detect moisture content in materials down to 0.1%. Gives us precise readings on water penetration depth, drying time estimates." The digital readout flickered to life. 87% humidity. High but not catastrophic for recent flood damage. Rebecca hovered nearby, checking her watch again. "How long will this take?" "The insurance adjusters need accurate data," I finished. "Trust me, rushing this process costs everyone money later." The sensors emitted soft beeping sounds as I worked methodically through the room. Each measurement told a story about water flow, timing, material absorption rates. I'd done hundreds of these assessments. Every flood had a signature, a pattern that revealed how the water moved and when. But this pattern made no sense. Moving systematically through the vault, I noticed the inconsistencies immediately. The moisture readings near the alleged burst point, where Rebecca claimed the 6-inch pipe had failed, read only 73% humidity. But sensors 20 feet away, near the vault entrance, showed 91%. "The water pressure was so intense," Rebecca explained, her voice carrying a nervous edge. "It sprayed everywhere, like a fire hose." I nodded politely but frowned at my readouts. In 15 years of restoration work, I'd never seen patterns like this. Physics doesn't lie. Humidity should decrease with distance from the source. Water flows downhill, spreads in predictable patterns based on pressure, volume, and time. This looked random, almost deliberate. "Mrs. Garcia," I said, moving to another section of the vault. "Tell me again about the timing. 3:47 a.m.? "Exactly. The security system logged the failure." She checked her phone again. Still no messages. "Everything went dark at once." I attached another probe to a box near the center of the room. 94% humidity, higher than the alleged source point. My professional instincts began tingling with suspicion, that familiar feeling when evidence doesn't match the story. I ran my finger along the pipe joint where Rebecca claimed the burst occurred. Bone dry. The metal felt cool, undamaged. My moisture probe registered normal humidity levels here, 45%, exactly what you'd expect in an undamaged area. But 20 feet away, near the vault entrance, water stains climbed the steel walls in perfect vertical lines. I'd never seen anything like it. Water doesn't flow upward without pressure, and pressure leaves specific damage signatures I knew intimately. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Emma's soccer game moved to 4 p.m. Can you make it? I typed back quickly. Working a weird one, we'll try. Rebecca's voice echoed from the corridor as she took her call. Yes, I understand the adjuster is running late. No, that's fine. We'll wait. I used the privacy to examine the alleged burst site more carefully. The 6-inch pipe behind the damaged wall showed no signs of failure. No stress fractures, no corrosion, no joint separation. In 15 years of restoration work, I'd seen hundreds of burst pipes. This wasn't one. Moving back to the center of the vault, I attached another sensor to a deposit box. The readout climbed. 94% humidity, higher than the supposed source point. The moisture patterns formed something that made my stomach tighten, a nearly perfect grid across the floor, as if someone had placed water sources at calculated intervals. I pulled out my tablet and started mapping the readings. Each measurement painted a picture that defied everything Rebecca had told me. This wasn't random flood damage. This was methodical.
Any problems?
Rebecca's voice made me jump. She'd returned from her call, designer heels clicking against the wet concrete. Just being thorough, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Insurance companies appreciate detailed documentation. She checked her watch again, a nervous tick I was starting to recognize.
The adjuster should be here within the hour. Will you have preliminary estimates ready?
I'll need more time with the sensors. I moved to another section, noting how she followed my every movement. These readings are unusual. Unusual how? I paused, choosing my words carefully. My reputation depended on accuracy, not speculation. Water damage patterns tell a story about how flooding occurred. Pressure, volume, timing. The story has some inconsistencies. Rebecca's laugh sounded forced. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of weird situations. Actually, no. In 15 years, I haven't seen moisture distribution like this. I gestured toward my tablet screen. The humidity readings suggest multiple water sources, not a single pipe failure. Her face went pale. Multiple sources? Could be secondary damage. Pipes failing in sequence due to pressure changes. I was giving her an out, watching her reaction. But I'll need to check the entire plumbing system to confirm. Of course, whatever you need. But her voice carried an edge of panic now. I requested access to the security room upstairs to document electronic damage. Rebecca hesitated, wringing her hands. It's completely destroyed. Flooded worse than down here. No point looking. Insurance protocol requires documentation of all damaged systems, I explained, even if they're total losses. Reluctantly, she led me up a narrow staircase to a small room lined with monitors and server equipment. I flicked on my flashlight, expecting to see water damage. Instead, I found a completely dry space. Monitors were dark, but the backup power system showed green status lights. You said this flooded? I asked, running my moisture probe along the walls. Readings showed normal humidity levels, 42%, bone dry. The water came up through the floor drains, Rebecca said quickly. We had to pump it out immediately to prevent electrical fires. I nodded, but nothing added up. For a system that allegedly failed during catastrophic flooding, everything looked suspiciously intact. The server racks showed no water stains, no corrosion, no signs of emergency pumping. Back in the vault, I completed my systematic sensor sweep. Each reading confirmed what my experience was telling me. This flood had been artificially created from inside the facility. The moisture penetration times were all wrong for a 3:47 a.m. incident. The damage patterns suggested hours of controlled water introduction, not a sudden catastrophic failure. My HF 3000 sensors had painted a clear picture, invisible to untrained eyes, but obvious to someone who understood moisture dynamics. Rebecca Garcia had orchestrated this accident for reasons I didn't yet understand. "When can you start the restoration work?" she pressed, hovering as I packed my equipment. "I'll need to file my initial assessment with the insurance company first," I replied. "Standard protocol." Her face tightened. "How long does that take?" "Couple days, maybe longer if there are complications." I met her eyes directly. "Depends on what the data shows." Standing in the vault doorway, I reviewed my sensor readings one final time. The moisture patterns were impossible to ignore. Multiple controlled water sources had created this flooding simultaneously. The physics didn't lie. Rebecca Garcia had turned her own vault into a crime scene, and my restoration equipment had just documented the evidence. I set my HF 3000 sensor array on the vault's polished concrete floor, the equipment coming alive with soft electronic beeps that echoed off the steel walls. Rebecca stood 3 feet away, her designer heels clicking in impatient rhythm against the floor. Every 30 seconds, she checked that gold Cartier watch, the kind that cost more than my truck. "How much longer for this scanning thing?" she asked, tapping her red-soled Louboutin against the concrete. The sound was sharp, deliberate, expensive. The air down here was thick with competing scents: damp stone, the metallic tang of wet steel, and something else. Expensive leather from the damaged safety deposit boxes mixed with her Chanel perfume. It was like walking through a flooded jewelry store. I methodically placed sensors at 12-foot intervals, my calloused hands steady despite her obvious impatience. "Standard grid pattern, Mrs. Garcia. Need complete coverage for the insurance documentation. Most clients wanted thorough work for their insurance claims. Hell, they usually asked me to find more damage, not less." But Rebecca kept checking that watch, kept glancing toward the vault entrance like she was expecting someone, or afraid someone might show up. Something about her urgency felt wrong. I pulled out the thermal imaging camera, its screen flickering to life with rainbow-colored heat signatures. The walls told their story in blues and reds, cool spots where moisture had traveled, warm areas that stayed dry. And that's when my stomach dropped. "These moisture trails," I muttered, studying the screen's display. "The patterns were all wrong. They're moving upward from the floor, not down from the ceiling pipe." Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that her perfume mixed with the musty vault air. "What does that mean exactly?" Her voice carried a sharp edge I hadn't heard before. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. "Water doesn't flow uphill. Basic physics. The kind of stuff you learn in high school and never forget when you spend 20 years chasing moisture through buildings. The laws of physics don't lie, even when people do." "Just documenting the flow patterns," I said, taking screenshots of the thermal display. "Insurance companies like detailed reports." But internally, I was building a picture. The moisture had entered from multiple points along the floor, not from above, not from a burst pipe, from below or from the sides, in a pattern that defied gravity. "I need to check the building's digital access logs," I said, pulling out my tablet. "Sometimes humidity patterns correlate with HVAC cycles, security protocols, standard procedure." Rebecca's manicured fingers tightened on her designer handbag. That's not part of restoration work, is it?" The vault's LED lighting cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look older than her 40-something years, making her look worried. "Standard procedure," I lied smoothly. The real reason was those moisture spikes I was seeing on my sensors. They were too precise, too timed, like someone had turned a faucet on and off, on and off. Someone had controlled this flood, My tablet connected to the building's environmental system, data streaming across the screen in neat columns. Humidity readings, temperature fluctuations, system activation logs. I scrolled back to Sunday night, October 14th, and there it was. Humidity spikes at 3:47 a.m., 3:52 a.m., and 4:03 a.m., each spike lasting exactly 90 seconds, then nothing until the morning discovery. Rebecca paced behind me, her heels clicking against the concrete like a metronome of anxiety. Click, click, click. Turn. Click, click, click. These readings show water introduction in controlled bursts, I explained, pointing to my screen. Like someone was regulating the flow? Her laugh sounded forced, brittle, like glass about to shatter. That's impossible. The pipe burst was catastrophic. You saw the damage yourself. But my equipment doesn't lie. The moisture had entered in measured doses, not the chaotic flood pattern of a genuine pipe failure. 90 seconds on, 5 minutes off, 90 seconds on. Methodical. Planned. I pulled up the building's security system logs, my pulse quickening as the data loaded. Access codes, door entries, system overrides, the digital breadcrumbs of Sunday night. At 3:42 a.m., someone had used access code RG-2847 to disable the vault's environmental controls, 5 minutes before the first humidity spike. RG-2847, Rebecca Garcia. Mrs. Garcia, I said carefully, keeping my voice level. Were you here Sunday night? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire you can't see yet. Rebecca's face went pale beneath her foundation, the color draining until her expensive makeup looked like a mask. No, I was at home. Why would you ask that? Her voice wavered, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her pearl necklace. The confident businesswoman from an hour ago was cracking. I pretended to focus on my moisture readings while my mind processed the timeline. Rebecca's personal access code, used at 3:42 a.m. First water surge at 3:47 a.m. The precision was damning. Sometimes these systems glitch, Rebecca said quickly, moving closer to peer at my screen. False readings, you know? Insurance companies love to blame the victims. Her breath smelled like expensive coffee and desperation. I could feel the heat radiating off her body, see the slight tremor in her hands as she pointed at my tablet. I nodded non-committally, but internally I was building a case. The digital trail was clear as the moisture patterns on my sensors. She was here. She disabled the systems. She controlled the flooding. 20 years in this business, and I'd never seen anything like it. I closed my laptop and walked back to the vault entrance, where my ultrasonic thickness gauge waited on its tripod. Time to check the primary seals, those massive rubber gaskets designed to keep water out even during catastrophic floods. The HF3000's ultrasonic probe traced along the vault's main seal, sending high-frequency pulses through the rubber. The readings made my blood run cold. "Rebecca," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come look at this." She hurried over, her heels echoing in the concrete space. "What now?" I ran my finger along the primary seal, pointing to the telltale marks. These seals are designed to withstand massive water pressure. They're rated for 20 feet of standing water. I paused, letting the implications sink in. But look at these deactivation points. The rubber showed clear manual manipulation marks, precise indentations where someone had physically disengaged the seal mechanisms from inside the vault. Not torn or burst from pressure, deliberately opened. These weren't pressure breached, Mrs. Garcia. Someone opened them by hand. Rebecca's breathing became shallow, rapid. Her perfectly manicured fingers clutched at her pearl necklace like a lifeline. That can't be right. The water pressure from the burst pipe must have overwhelmed them. But the evidence was crystal clear. The ultrasonic readings showed uniform thickness along the seal, until you reached the manual release points. Someone had stood right here, in this vault, and systematically opened the flood barriers. Ma'am, these seals don't fail like this naturally. I showed her the gauge readings. See these indentation patterns? That's human manipulation. Someone who knew exactly how these systems worked. Her face went white beneath her foundation. I don't understand what you're implying. My phone buzzed against my hip. Text message from Marcus Chen. Found something big. Meet me at the diner on 5th Street. Don't let Garcia know. I glanced at Rebecca, who was now pacing frantically, her composure cracking like old paint under pressure. Her confident businesswoman mask was slipping, revealing something desperate underneath. I need to grab some additional equipment from my truck, I told her, pocketing my phone. These seal readings require cross-referencing with my main database. Keep working, she snapped, her voice sharp with panic. The insurance adjuster comes tomorrow morning. We need this completed tonight. As I headed for the exit, I noticed Rebecca pulling out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. She was texting someone urgently, her body language screaming crisis management. My gut told me this wasn't good. The diner on 5th Street smelled like grease and desperation. Marcus Chen sat in a corner booth, a manila folder spread across the sticky table. His usually neat appearance looked frayed around the edges. Dave, sit down. You're not going to believe this. He slid the folder toward me. Rebecca Garcia filed an identical claim in Phoenix 3 years ago. My coffee grew cold as I studied the documents. Insurance claim forms, police reports, investigator notes. The similarities were chilling. Private vault facility, overnight flooding, security system malfunction, missing high-value items. Different insurance company, same exact MO, Marcus continued, his voice low. Mysterious water damage in a secure facility, conveniently timed when security cameras were down. I flipped through photographs of the Phoenix site. The damage patterns looked almost identical to what I'd seen today. What happened to that case? She collected $2.1 million. Case was closed 6 months later when the building was demolished for safety reasons. Marcus leaned forward. Dave, you're not dealing with opportunistic fraud here. This is a professional operation. The pieces clicked into place. Rebecca Garcia wasn't some desperate business owner trying to cover losses. She was a serial insurance scammer, and I'd walked right into her latest scheme. There's more, Marcus said, pulling out another document. The Phoenix facility? She bought it 8 months before the accident. Same timeline as Meridian Secure Storage. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the folder. She's done this before. She'll do it again. Not if we stop her first, but Dave, she's dangerous. People who run operations like this don't leave loose ends. I thought about the moisture readings, the access logs, the manually disabled seals. All the evidence was sitting in my equipment back at the vault. Evidence that could put Rebecca Garcia in prison for decades. When I returned to Meridian Secure Storage, Rebecca was waiting with 2 men in expensive suits. Lawyers from the look of their briefcases and predatory smiles. Mr. Walker, the taller one said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. We understand you're conducting unauthorized investigations beyond your restoration scope. My stomach dropped. Somehow, she knew what I'd been doing. Had she seen my text with Marcus? Been monitoring my equipment? We're prepared to pay double your standard fee for immediate completion of the restoration work, Rebecca added, her confidence fully restored now that she had legal backup. No more technical delays. The lawyer's presence felt like a threat wrapped in expensive fabric. They watched my every move as I stood there, calculating my next words carefully. Of course, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady despite my racing heart. Just standard moisture documentation for the insurance report. Nothing unusual. Rebecca's smile was cold as winter steel. Excellent. I knew we could reach an understanding. Playing dumb, I began packing my equipment methodically, coiling cables, shutting down sensors, organizing my tools with the practiced efficiency of 20 years in the field. The lawyers watched like hawks, noting every piece of gear I touched. But as I wound up the main sensor cable, I palmed the micro SD card from the HF3000's data port. All the digital evidence was on that tiny piece of plastic. Access logs, humidity patterns, seal analysis, ultrasonic readings. Everything needed to prove fraud. The lawyers could intimidate me into leaving, but they couldn't erase what my equipment had already recorded. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Walker," Rebecca said, as I loaded the last case into my truck. As I started the engine, I spotted a black sedan parked across the street. 2 men sat inside, watching me through tinted windows. Rebecca wasn't just covering her tracks, she was having me followed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Drop the investigation or your family pays." My hands shook as I read it again. Linda and Emma were at home, unprotected, probably making dinner and helping with homework. Normal Tuesday evening activities while I sat here holding evidence that could destroy a dangerous criminal. The fraud case had just become a matter of life and death. I knelt beside Vault Box 23, running the thermal scanner along its metal frame. The digital readout glowed steady, 68.2 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect ambient match. But my moisture detector told a different story entirely. Residual vapor pressure readings that made my stomach drop. "This wasn't gradual seepage," I muttered, snapping photos of the microscopic injection points dotting the seal. The math was brutal and undeniable. Natural pipe pressure maxes out around 80 psi on a good day. These readings showed 180 psi forced injection. Someone had used industrial equipment to drive water through gaps barely visible to the naked eye. Rebecca's designer heels clicked impatiently on the wet concrete behind me. Each step echoed off the steel walls like a countdown timer. "How much longer will this take?" Her voice cut through the humid air like a blade. "I have insurance adjusters arriving at noon." I didn't look up from my vapor analysis equipment. The numbers on the screen painted a picture she wouldn't want to see. "The physics don't add up, Ms. Garcia. Water entered your vault at pressures impossible from a simple pipe burst." Her laugh sounded like breaking glass. "I'm paying you to restore, not theorize." But I caught it. That micro-expression people make when they're caught. Her left eye twitched when I mentioned pressure readings. Just a fraction of a second, but my equipment had trained me to notice the smallest details. The vault's climate control system hummed overhead, its sensor array blinking red in sequence. Something had been tampered with. Recently, I moved my ultrasonic probe along the climate control intake vents. The device beeped frantically as it detected what I'd been dreading to find: deliberate puncture marks, each hole precisely 3.2 millimeters diameter. I'd seen those measurements before, on industrial injection nozzles. "Your climate system was sabotaged from inside," I stated, turning the scanner display toward Rebecca. The evidence was right there in digital clarity. Her face hardened like cooling concrete. "That's impossible. Only I have access." My pulse quickened as the implications hit me. Someone with vault access had orchestrated this entire disaster. The missing security footage suddenly made perfect sense. You can't record what you don't want recorded. Rebecca's knuckles went white as she gripped her phone. The expensive leather case creaked under the pressure. "Mr. Walker." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "You're here to restore water damage, not play detective. I suggest you focus on your actual job." The threat hung in the air like the moisture I'd been tracking. I continued photographing the evidence, but my hands shook slightly. The vault felt smaller now, more confined. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across Rebecca's face, making her look like something from a nightmare. I document everything for insurance purposes, I replied, keeping my voice steady though sweat beaded on my forehead. The climate control system's damaged sensors continued their ominous red blinking sequence, like warning lights on a sinking ship. I forced myself to move to Vault Section C, where the most valuable items had supposedly been stored. My thermal imaging revealed an impossible anomaly that made my breath catch. The most damaged area showed the least water exposure. The concrete here was bone dry beneath just a thin surface layer of artificial moisture. This section should be saturated, I said, more to myself than Rebecca. According to her story, this was ground zero for the pipe burst. She moved quickly to block my view of the empty safety deposit boxes. Water damage is unpredictable, she snapped, but her voice cracked on the last word. My equipment didn't lie, though. Someone had carefully staged this area while removing specific items first. The moisture patterns told the whole story, if you knew how to read them. Then the realization hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Specific high-value items were missing from areas that should have been most protected from any real flood damage. My moisture readings showed boxes 15, 23, and 31, supposedly containing the rarest coins and jewelry, according to the insurance manifest, had been bone dry when this flood occurred. Rebecca noticed my expression change. "Something wrong with your equipment?" she asked, but her voice lacked any conviction. My mind raced through the forensic evidence spreading out before me like a blueprint. The artificial flood wasn't just insurance fraud, it was cover for selective theft. She'd removed the most valuable items, then staged a disaster to claim they were destroyed. The insurance claim wasn't just fraud, it was the perfect crime. The micro SD card in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Everything was documented. Every impossible pressure reading, every staged moisture pattern, every piece of evidence that proved Rebecca Garcia had orchestrated her own disaster. But as I looked at her face, cold, calculating, desperate, I realized she knew exactly what I'd discovered. The silence stretched between us like a loaded spring. Rebecca's eyes never left my face as I processed what I'd discovered. The emergency lighting flickered again, casting shifting shadows across the vault walls. My phone buzzed against my hip. I glanced down. Marcus Chen. Personal calls during work hours? Rebecca's voice had changed. The frantic homeowner act was gone, replaced by something colder, predatory. I read the text quickly. Garcia's rushing the insurance payout. Meeting moved to tomorrow. Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the vault's metallic air. Anything important? Just my office checking in. I pocketed the phone, but my hands were shaking now. The vault suddenly felt smaller, like the steel walls were closing in. I see. She studied my face with the intensity of someone reading a balance sheet. You know, Mr. Walker, I've been thinking about your thoroughness today. The way she said thoroughness made my skin crawl. I forced myself to continue documenting, taking photos of the impossibly dry areas where the most valuable items should have been. But every click of my camera felt like a countdown timer. Rebecca's phone rang, a sharp electronic sound that echoed off the steel walls. She answered without looking away from me. "Sí, está aquí," she said, her back turned. Spanish, but I caught enough. "Yes, he's here." Then, quieter. "Tenemos un problema. Es demasiado inteligente." We have a problem. He's too smart. My blood turned to ice water. I kept working, kept photographing, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just insurance fraud. The careful staging, the missing items, the organized setup. This was bigger than one desperate woman trying to make a quick score. "Mi abogado quiere hablar con él," Rebecca continued into the phone. "My attorney wants to talk to him." I began packing my equipment with deliberate calm, though my pulse hammered against my collar. Every piece of gear felt impossibly heavy. The HF-3000 sensors, the thermal imaging camera, the micro SD card burning like a coal in my pocket. "I'll need to file my preliminary report with your insurance company," I said, keeping my voice professional despite the fear crawling up my throat. Rebecca ended her call and turned back to me. Her smile could have frozen antifreeze. "Actually, Mr. Walker, I think we should discuss your observations privately first." She moved between me and the vault door, not blocking it exactly, but making her position clear. "My attorney wants to review your findings before they go to the insurance company. Standard procedure for high-security facilities like this." The threat was wrapped in corporate speak, but it was still a threat. "Ma'am, I have protocols to follow. I'm sure we can work something out." The vault door opened with a heavy clang that echoed through the chamber. Two men in expensive suits entered, not the kind of suits restoration workers wear, but the kind that cost more than my truck. They didn't introduce themselves, just positioned themselves near the exit like bookends. My mouth went dry. The scope of what I'd stumbled into hit me like a sledgehammer. "Mr. Walker," the taller one said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that comes from never having to raise it. "We understand you've made some interesting discoveries today." I looked from him to Rebecca to the second man. All three were watching me with the patience of people who held all the cards. "I'm just a restoration specialist," I managed. "I document what I see for insurance purposes." Rebecca laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Unfortunately, what you've seen could complicate our business arrangement." The vault's climate control system continued its damaged rhythm, red lights blinking in sequence. Emergency, emergency, emergency. I realized I was holding evidence worth millions in my hands, and on that SD card. And people had killed for far less than millions. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just here to do a job. Document the damage, file a report. That's it." The shorter man stepped forward. He had the kind of build that suggested he'd done more than push papers in his career. "Mr. Walker, this is a time-sensitive matter. Mrs. Garcia has a proposal for you." Rebecca reached into her briefcase and produced a document. A simple non-disclosure agreement, standard practice for high-security facilities handling sensitive client assets. She handed me the papers. I scanned the first page, then flipped through the rest. Legal jargon, but the meaning was clear. A gag order that would prevent me from testifying about anything I'd found. My signature would make me complicit in the fraud. "I need to think about this," I said, stalling. "Time is a luxury we don't have," the tall man said. Behind him, the vault door swung shut with a metallic finality that echoed through the chamber. I looked at the three faces surrounding me, at the contract in my hands, at the vault door that had just closed between me and the outside world. The emergency lighting continued its ominous blinking, casting everything in hellish red shadows. I realized I wasn't leaving this vault until I signed that paper, or until they found another way to ensure my silence. The micro SD card in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. All the evidence, all the proof of what Rebecca Garcia had done, and all of it worthless if I never made it out of this underground tomb to use it. The vault door slammed shut behind me with a sound like a coffin lid. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the two men in expensive suits. The taller one held out a thick document, his manicured fingers steady despite the tension crackling through the underground air. "Mr. Walker," he said, his voice smooth as oil on water. "This is a standard non-disclosure agreement. Sign it and we can all walk away from this misunderstanding." Rebecca stood behind them, her designer suit wrinkled now, sweat beading on her forehead despite the vault's chill. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face. She looked like a cornered animal. I kept my hands at my sides, feeling the weight of the micro SD card in my pocket. 20 years of restoration work, and I'd never been trapped like this. The vault's steel walls seemed to close in around us.
"What kind of misunderstanding?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt.
The shorter man stepped forward. His cologne couldn't mask the smell of fear sweat. The kind where a restoration specialist gets confused about what he saw. Moisture readings can be interpreted many ways. I looked down at my equipment scattered across the floor. The HF-3000 sensors, the thermal imaging camera, the ultrasonic detectors. $20,000 worth of scientific instruments that had just exposed $1 million fraud. "My equipment doesn't lie," I said quietly. "Water entered this vault from 12 separate injection points. The climate control system was sabotaged with 3.2 millimeter puncture holes. Rebecca's access code disabled the environmental controls at exactly 3:42 a.m. Rebecca's breathing became shallow, rapid. "Dave, please."
"You don't understand what you're dealing with here." The taller man's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold.
"Mr. Walker, let me explain your situation. You're underground, alone, with no cell service. Your truck is being watched. Your family—" He paused, letting the threat hang in the recycled air. "Well, accidents happen." My mouth went dry. Linda, Emma. My little girl had a soccer game this afternoon. I promised to be there. But then I thought about the evidence. The physics don't lie. Water pressure, vapor barriers, psychrometric readings. They told a story that couldn't be erased by threats or NDAs. Rebecca had stolen from her own clients, then tried to cover it with insurance fraud. People who trusted her with their most valuable possessions. "I need to see that agreement first," I said. The taller man slid the document across a steel table.
23 pages of legal text, dense as concrete.
I flipped through it, my calloused fingers catching on the smooth paper. Standard boilerplate mostly, but the compensation clause made my stomach drop. $2 million for my silence. $2 million. More money than I'd see in a lifetime of restoration work. "That's quite an offer," I said, setting the papers down. "For someone who just measured some moisture." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice cracking. "Dave, please. I have debts you can't imagine. The vault was hemorrhaging money. The clients were pulling out." She gestured wildly at the steel walls around us. "I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean it to go?" I asked. The shorter man checked his watch. "Mr. Walker, we need a decision. Now." I looked at my equipment one more time. The thermal camera that had revealed the puncture holes. The ultrasonic sensors that proved the seals were manually disabled. 20 years of learning to read what water does to buildings, and it all came down to this moment. "You know what?" I said, reaching into my pocket. "I think Detective Mills should see this evidence first." I held up the micro SD card between my thumb and forefinger. Such a small thing to bring down $1 million fraud. Rebecca's face went white. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand exactly what I'm doing." I slipped the card back into my pocket. "I'm finishing my job." The taller man's smile finally disappeared. He reached inside his jacket, and my heart hammered against my ribs. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a cell phone. "One call," he said. "Your family's location becomes very public information." The vault's recycled air felt thick as soup. I thought about Emma's soccer game, about Linda waiting for me to come home, about 20 years of honest work that had taught me one simple truth: the evidence doesn't lie. "Make your call," I said quietly, "but I'm walking out of here with this evidence." Rebecca collapsed into a chair, her designer suit wrinkled and stained. "It was supposed to be simple," she whispered. "Remove the most valuable items, stage the flood, collect the insurance, clean and surgical." "Except you forgot about physics," I said. "Water doesn't lie about where it's been." The shorter man was already backing toward the vault door. "This is above my pay grade," he muttered, pulling out his own phone. I gathered my equipment methodically, the same way I'd done thousands of times before. HF 3000 sensors in their foam cases, thermal camera wrapped in protective cloth, each piece of gear that had exposed Rebecca's scheme, now evidence in a federal fraud case. The pump rental receipt was still in your office trash, I told Rebecca as I packed. Tony Russo keeps detailed records. Industrial-grade water injection equipment, rented October 13th, returned October 14th. Same day as your pipe burst. Rebecca looked up at me with hollow eyes. You're just a restoration worker. How did you? 20 years of following water where it goes, I said. You learn to see patterns. The vault door opened with a heavy clank. Detective Mills stood in the entrance, her badge visible on her belt. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers waited in the corridor. Mr. Walker, she said, we got your message. I'd sent the text before entering the vault, a simple insurance policy. If I didn't check in within 2 hours, Marcus Chen would call the police. The evidence is on this card, I said, handing over the micro SD. Moisture patterns, thermal imaging, access logs, everything you need. Rebecca didn't resist when they read her rights. The 2 men in suits had vanished like smoke, probably already on phones to their lawyers. But the evidence was digital, permanent, unshakable. Outside, October sunlight felt like freedom. My truck sat in the parking lot, dusty and reliable. I loaded my equipment with the same care I'd used for 20 years, each tool earning its place through honest work. Marcus Chen appeared beside me, notepad already out. The insurance company will want a full report. They'll get one, I said, complete with recommendations for improved security protocols. This case is going to make waves, Marcus said. Private vault fraud, selective theft, staged disasters. You've exposed something bigger than just Rebecca Garcia. I slammed the truck's tailgate shut, the familiar weight of my tools settling into place. I just read what the moisture told me. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Emma scored 2 goals. Where are you? The soccer field was 20 minutes away. I could still make the second half, still see my daughter celebrate with grass stains on her uniform and joy on her face. I've got somewhere to be, I told Marcus. The drive through downtown felt different now. The Meridian Street facility grew smaller in my rearview mirror, just another building where water had revealed the truth. My truck's engine hummed steadily, carrying me away from million-dollar fraud and toward a 12-year-old soccer game. At the field, Linda saved me a spot on the aluminum bleachers. How was work? She asked as I sat down heavily. Complicated, I said, watching Emma sprint down the field. But finished. The afternoon sun warmed my face. Emma's team celebrated another goal, and I cheered until my voice went hoarse. Some victories happen in courtrooms, some in underground vaults, and some on suburban soccer fields. All of them matter. That evening, I sat in my workshop, cleaning each piece of equipment with the same precision I'd brought to the vault investigation. The local news played on my phone. Vault owner arrested for insurance fraud. My tools gleamed under the workshop lights, ready for tomorrow's honest work. The HF 3000 sensors that had exposed Rebecca's fraud would measure moisture in flooded basements again tomorrow. Truth-telling is steady work, one measurement at a time. Weeks later, Marcus called with the final update. Rebecca pled guilty to avoid trial, 5 years federal prison, full restitution to her clients. I continued my paperwork while listening. Your testimony was crucial. The insurance company sent a bonus check, but I filed it away without ceremony. My reputation spread quietly through professional networks, the restoration guy who sees what others miss. The vault case became a reference point, but I treated it like any other job completed with integrity. Good work speaks for itself. On a Saturday morning, I loaded equipment for another water damage call. Emma helped carry the lighter cases, asking questions about moisture detection. "Dad, how do you know where water went?" I explained capillary action and thermal imaging in simple terms while Linda watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, smiling at our daughter's curiosity. The October air carried the smell of fallen leaves.
My truck